There's a silent force at work in your life. A force so consistent, so precise, and so powerful that it responds to your every thought, instantly. Not just your wishes, not just your dreams. Every thought, every mental image, every internal conversation you replay over and over in your head. It's not just affecting you, it's affecting everything. For generations, spiritual teachers and mystics have spoken about the mind's influence over reality. Ideas often dismissed as pseudoscience or wishful thinking. But now, with the advancement of physics, neuroscience, and consciousness research, those age-old claims are beginning to echo louder in the halls of science. The line between imagination and materiality is thinner than we ever suspected. It's not simply about believing something until it comes true. This is not just about wishful thinking or positive affirmations. This is about understanding the intricate way in which your consciousness interacts with the fundamental structure of the universe itself. The deeper we go into the quantum realm and the mysteries of the brain, the more we begin to see a pattern emerging, and that pattern points to one astonishing conclusion. The universe isn't reacting to the external world. It's reacting to you. You might wonder how that could possibly work. Isn't the universe governed by cold, indifferent laws? Isn't it the domain of atoms and energy, not thought and emotion? Here's where things start to get fascinating. When scientists peer into the subatomic world, they discover a reality that's fluid, responsive, and alarmingly strange. A reality where particles shift behavior based on whether they're being observed, where probabilities collapse into certainties not by randomness, but by interaction with consciousness. This isn't theoretical fantasy. This is the documented foundation of quantum mechanics. And it raises a question so provocative, it's hard to ignore. Is the universe waiting for you to think so it can respond? In this video, we're going to explore 6 powerful ideas that bring this possibility into sharp focus. Each one is rooted in real scientific theories, groundbreaking discoveries, and bold questions that push the limits of what we know. We'll explore how attention can physically alter reality at the smallest scale, how your brain emits frequencies that may ripple out far beyond your skull, how entanglement could link your consciousness with events across time and space, and how the very structure of your brain rewires your experience of the world in real time. We'll also look at intention as a measurable energetic force. And synchronicity, those strange, unexplainable coincidences that seem to line up perfectly with your inner thoughts. Are they really accidents? Or are they evidence that the universe is mirroring your mind? This is not about wishful thinking. It's about real thinking. And once you understand how responsive the universe may actually be, you'll begin to think differently, very differently. So if you've ever suspected that your thoughts carry weight, that your mind has a deeper role in shaping your world, stay with me. The science is evolving. The patterns are revealing themselves. And the implications? They are massive. Let's begin with the first idea that changed everything, the discovery that the very act of observing something can change what it becomes. In the early 20th century, physics took a sharp turn into the unknown. Scientists were trying to understand the behavior of the tiniest building blocks of reality, particles like electrons and photons. What they found shattered the rules of classical science. At the heart of this shift was a discovery so strange, it still confounds physicists today. It's known as the observer effect. When researchers attempted to measure the location or momentum of a subatomic particle, they noticed something unusual. The mere act of observing, of setting up a measurement, would influence the outcome. The particle didn't seem to decide what it was until it was being watched. To be clear, these weren't just subtle shifts in behavior. The particles literally behaved differently based on whether they were being observed or not. Take the famous double-slit experiment. When electrons are fired at a screen through 2 slits, they form an interference pattern, a wave-like result, as if each electron passed through both slits simultaneously. That makes no sense in classical terms. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. When a detector is placed at the slits to observe which path the electron takes, the interference pattern vanishes. Suddenly, the electrons behave like individual particles, passing through one slit or the other, never both. The act of measurement collapses a cloud of probabilities into a single, definite outcome. In other words, Observation affects reality. Now, this doesn't mean that looking at your coffee cup changes its molecular structure. The observer effect takes place at the quantum level, a realm far removed from everyday experience. But it opens a doorway to a radical possibility. That consciousness plays an active role in shaping the physical world. Think about what that implies. Reality, at its most fundamental level, doesn't behave in a fixed, predetermined way. It responds to interaction. It responds to awareness. This leads many scientists and philosophers to ask, what exactly is doing the observing? Is it the machine, the detector, or the conscious mind interpreting the result? Some interpretations of quantum theory suggest that consciousness itself is the ultimate observer, that it causes the collapse of the wave function, turning potential into actuality. This is more than speculation. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Eugene Wigner argued that it was consciousness that caused quantum systems to resolve into definite states. He famously wrote that it was not possible to formulate the laws of quantum mechanics in a fully consistent way without reference to consciousness. Other scientists have disagreed, proposing that measurement doesn't require a human mind, only an interaction with another system. Still, the debate remains unresolved. And the fact that awareness does seem to matter can't be ignored. Now shift that idea into your daily life. If awareness shapes outcome, what does your attention do? We know that what we focus on tends to grow. Not in a magical sense, but in a deeply practical one. You notice more of what you look for. You reinforce patterns by giving them mental weight. You bring unconscious ideas into conscious experience through consistent thought. And just like in the double-slit experiment, where a particle collapses into a specific state when observed, your attention collapses your experience into a specific reality. That's not metaphor. That's how perception filters data. Your brain receives millions of sensory inputs every second, but you only consciously register a small fraction. What you focus on determines what you perceive, and what you perceive becomes your reality. So whether we're talking about quantum particles or personal experience, the takeaway is the same. Attention alters outcome. Observation changes the field. Consciousness is not separate from the system. It is part of the system. The observer effect tells us something revolutionary, that even at the smallest scale of existence, reality isn't rigid. It's flexible. It responds. And if it responds to measurement, to observation, to awareness, then perhaps your thoughts are not private echoes. Perhaps they are instructions. Perhaps they are signals. Signals that the universe is not just receiving, but actively shaping itself around. Now let's take this further, because if observation affects particles, what happens when your brain, a constant generator of electrical activity, begins sending out signals into the world? Next, we explore whether your brainwaves are simply internal activity, or if they're sending vibrations into space, into the field, and into reality itself. And the answer may surprise you. Your brain is not quiet. At every moment, even when you are asleep, it pulses with electrical rhythms. These aren't just vague internal sparks. These are precise, measurable signals. Real frequencies that ripple through your skull, into the space around you, and potentially far beyond. The brain operates using electrical impulses generated by neurons firing in complex patterns. These patterns form rhythms known as brainwaves. You've likely heard of some of them: alpha, beta, theta, delta, and gamma waves. Each of these corresponds to a different state of consciousness, from deep sleep to focused concentration and heightened intuition. Here's what's often overlooked. These waves don't stay locked inside your head. They extend outward. They can be measured using EEG, electroencephalography, devices placed on the scalp. The fact that we can detect them externally proves that your thoughts, at least in the form of electrical activity, are radiating into space. But here's the bigger question. Is the brain just producing random static, or are your thoughts sending structured signals into the universe? Every time your neurons fire in sequence, every thought, image, memory, or intention, you create an electromagnetic pattern. These fields interact with other energy fields around you, including those of other people, and possibly the larger energetic field that science still struggles to define. Some researchers have proposed that the brain might act more like a transmitter and receiver than we've traditionally believed. Rather than containing consciousness entirely within itself, it may function as a medium that both interprets and projects awareness. This shifts the conversation from what's happening in the brain to what the brain is doing to the field around it. Let's get more specific. The idea of electromagnetic influence isn't purely speculative. In 1999, the HeartMath Institute demonstrated that the human heart and brain emit electromagnetic fields that can be detected several feet outside the body. Moreover, these fields shift in response to emotional states and focused intention. When a person enters a calm, coherent state, like in meditation or focused visualization, the electromagnetic field becomes more ordered, more powerful, and more measurable. These findings suggest that intention has a signature, that thought can be coherent or chaotic, strong or weak, focused or scattered, and that these qualities may impact the surrounding environment, not just metaphorically but physically. One of the most intriguing efforts to study this phenomenon on a global scale is the Global Consciousness Project. Launched in the late 1990s by researchers at Princeton, this initiative uses random number generators placed all over the world to detect deviations in randomness that correlate with large-scale human emotion and focus. During major world events, such as natural disasters, mass meditations, or moments of collective grief or joy, the data often shows statistically significant deviations from randomness. In simple terms, when large numbers of people are mentally and emotionally aligned, it appears to affect random systems. This challenges one of our deepest assumptions, that thoughts and emotions are entirely private. The data suggests they may, under the right conditions, exert influence at a distance. That the brain's electrical output is not just passive noise, but part of a larger interactive system. Now, some will argue that these effects are too subtle or inconsistent to be called proof. And it's true, this field of research is still in its infancy. But the emerging pattern is impossible to ignore. Thoughts generate energy. That energy is structured, and structured energy can carry information. If your thoughts are broadcasting electromagnetic signals, then the quality of your thinking matters in more than just psychological ways. A thought of gratitude doesn't just change your mood. It changes your electromagnetic signature. It aligns your brainwaves into a more coherent pattern. And coherence is power. Conversely, chaotic, fear-driven thinking results in disordered brainwave patterns. This state not only affects your physical health, raising cortisol levels, disrupting sleep, weakening your immune system, but it also may be sending a scrambled signal into the field, attracting and amplifying disorder. Some researchers have compared the brain to a tuning fork. When you strike it with clarity and purpose, it resonates clearly. That resonance, in theory, could influence other systems around you, like a dropped pebble sending ripples across a still pond. This idea has also gained traction in the study of intention-based experiments. In carefully controlled trials, practitioners have been able to influence the growth of plants, the formation of ice crystals, or the pH of water simply through focused intention. These effects, while small, are often repeatable and suggest that consciousness may exert a subtle yet real influence on physical systems. Again, the mechanism is still being explored, but the implications are extraordinary. Your thoughts may not only impact your body and your perception, they may also imprint themselves into the energetic fabric around you. They may interfere with or enhance the systems of others. They may even shape probability, nudging reality toward alignment with your inner state. Let's bring it back to the idea of brainwaves. Each type of brainwave reflects a different level of influence. Alpha waves occur when you're calm and relaxed. This is the state most often associated with light meditation, intuitive insights, and learning. Theta waves emerge during deep relaxation and visualization. This is a state linked with subconscious access and creative problem-solving. Gamma waves, the fastest, are associated with bursts of insight, compassion, and transcendental experiences. They are powerful but fleeting, often associated with flow states and peak performance. When you consciously guide your mind into these states, you increase coherence. You sharpen the signal. You project clarity. And clarity, in this case, may be more than a mental state, it may be a transmission. Think of this. If every brain is broadcasting, then we live in a sea of signals. And just as radios pick up stations by tuning to specific frequencies, your thoughts may tune in to experiences that resonate with your dominant state. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are resonating with. This isn't magic. This is resonance. This is frequency. This is the quiet science of energetic influence beginning to find its voice. So the next time you're lost in thought, remember, you're not just thinking inside your head. You're sending signals outward. You're vibrating into the field, and the field is responding. The question is, what kind of signal are you sending? Next, we'll examine something even stranger, the possibility that your consciousness might be connected to everything everywhere all at once, through a phenomenon that physics has proven, but still can't fully explain. It's called entanglement, and if it applies to the mind, it could rewrite everything we believe about thought, time, and reality. In the heart of quantum mechanics lies a phenomenon so baffling, so counterintuitive, it forced Einstein himself to question the completeness of modern physics. He called it spooky action at a distance. Scientists call it quantum entanglement, and it reveals something astonishing. Two particles, once connected, remain linked across any distance, even when separated by galaxies. Change one and the other responds. Instantly. No signal. No time delay. No physical connection. Just an invisible relationship that defies space and time. This isn't science fiction. This is verified, repeated, experimentally confirmed science. And it has major implications for what we understand about reality. Now here's the question. If particles can be entangled, can minds be entangled too? The traditional view of consciousness treats it as an isolated experience. Your thoughts are your own. Your brain is a closed system, but quantum entanglement suggests otherwise. It introduces the possibility that minds, like particles, might be fundamentally connected. Start with this: your brain is not a separate universe. It's made of the same particles that make up everything else. And those particles are constantly interacting, exchanging energy, responding to fields and forces we can measure, and some we still can't. If the basic units of your brain are part of a quantum system, then you're not sealed off from the rest of the world. You're embedded in a vast network of relationships that might extend across time and space. Consider this: when two particles become entangled, they don't just mirror each other's states. They form a single system even when divided. The change in one is a change in the other. There is no separation in the quantum world. Location becomes irrelevant. What matters is the connection. Now apply that logic to thought. If your consciousness is entangled with something, someone, some event, some outcome, then perhaps your focus, your awareness, your internal experience creates external correlations. These correlations don't follow the rules of linear cause and effect. They aren't bound by time or distance. They emerge because the underlying reality is unified. This opens up the possibility that thought isn't just reactive. It's relational. That when you think about someone you're emotionally close to, and they call or message you moments later, it's not coincidence. That sudden feelings of intuition, déjà vu, or knowing things you couldn't logically know aren't anomalies. They're signals, evidence of a deeper connectivity. Now, to be clear, entanglement in quantum physics applies to specific particles prepared in specific conditions. Extending this to consciousness is still a matter of theory. But leading scientists are exploring this frontier. One of the most discussed models is the orchestroar theory, proposed by physicist Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. They suggest that consciousness arises not just from brain chemistry or neural networks, but from quantum processes happening inside microtubules, tiny structures within your neurons. If this theory is correct, it would mean your conscious experience is inherently quantum. It would mean the same strange laws that allow particles to be entangled apply to thought, memory, awareness. And in a quantum system, everything is connected in ways we don't yet fully understand. Let's take a step back. Throughout history, traditions around the world have spoken of a universal mind, a field of consciousness that links all beings. Science has often dismissed this as mysticism. But now, with quantum entanglement on the table, the idea no longer sits outside the realm of possibility. Your mind may not be a closed loop. It may be a node in a much larger web, one that spans beyond physical limits. This would explain many of the strange, often unexplainable experiences people report. Shared dreams, remote viewing, intuition that turns out to be accurate, synchronicities that defy probability. These aren't glitches. These are glimpses, evidence perhaps that you are already connected. Not symbolically, not metaphorically, literally. The implications are profound. It means that when you think of someone with emotion, intention, or clarity, that thought may ripple across an invisible link. That influence doesn't require proximity. That your mind, under certain conditions, might transcend time altogether. There have been studies exploring this. In one set of experiments, pairs of people were placed in isolated rooms and instructed to send or receive emotional impressions or images. In some trials, the receivers displayed measurable changes in brain activity, correlated with the exact moments the senders were concentrating. These effects, while subtle, were statistically significant. They suggested the presence of non-local connections, what some call mental entanglement. Skeptics argue that more data is needed, and they're right, but the early findings hint at something extraordinary. It also means that thoughts of love, compassion, and peace are not confined to your inner world. If consciousness is interconnected, then emotional states have influence. Your mental state becomes part of the collective field. This gives you responsibility but also power. It suggests that tuning your mind to clarity, focus, and harmony may help others do the same. That conscious thought may strengthen the links between people, even across vast distances. And that disruption, anger, fear, hostility, may fracture the coherence of that field. Now, think again about entangled particles. They don't just react, they synchronize. They move as one. There is no delay, no confusion, just alignment. If consciousness shares this property, then alignment isn't just about getting your thoughts straight. It's about syncing with something greater, a larger field, a deeper system of intelligence that listens, responds, and echoes your mental frequency. This isn't a metaphor. This is where science and ancient wisdom start to speak the same language. For too long, we've been trained to believe in separation. You versus me, here versus there, then versus now. But entanglement breaks those illusions. It shows us that distance is not division, that time is not a wall, and that the mind might be more than a local phenomenon, it might be a bridge. So when you think, don't assume your thoughts stay locked inside your skull. They may travel, they may connect, they may influence far more than you can see. And the next time you feel a sudden insight, a meaningful coincidence, or a deep knowing that seems to arrive from nowhere, maybe it didn't come from nowhere at all. Maybe it came from everything. Next, we'll explore how intention itself may carry weight. Not symbolically, but energetically. How thoughts, when focused and charged with emotion, can become a measurable force. Can the universe be shaped not only by what you observe, but by what you intend? We're about to find out. Thoughts are invisible. They can't be held, touched, or stored in a container. But they're not nothing. They are born from electrical activity, shaped by biochemical reactions, and sustained by the flow of information in your neural networks. More importantly, they may not stay contained. Once released, especially when fueled by intense emotion or clear intention, they might exert pressure on the world itself. The idea that thought is energy is not just a poetic phrase. It's a hypothesis grounded in measurable activity. Every time you think, you trigger electrochemical impulses across synapses. These impulses generate microcurrents of electricity, which in turn produce electromagnetic fields. These fields are real. They can be measured, and they don't just vanish at the edge of your skull. They expand outward into your environment, into the space around you, and potentially into a much larger energetic structure that science is only beginning to study. Now, energy by itself doesn't always produce change. For energy to be transformative, it must be coherent, focused, and directed. This is where intention comes into play. Intention is not a vague desire. It is structured energy. It's thought with purpose. When you combine mental imagery, emotional charge, and focused attention, you amplify the signal. You take the randomness out of thought and turn it into a directive, an energetic instruction. And if thoughts are capable of shaping subtle fields, then intention is the sharpest instrument you possess. Let's look at the work of Dr. William Tiller, former chair of the Materials Science Department at Stanford University. Tiller conducted groundbreaking experiments suggesting that human intention could influence physical systems in measurable ways. In one study, he had practitioners imprint devices with a specific intention, such as changing the pH of water. When those devices were shipped to remote labs and activated, the water's pH shifted in alignment with the original intention, even though no physical manipulation occurred. Skeptics argued that environmental factors could explain the result. But Tiller's experiments were controlled. The changes didn't occur with non-imprinted devices. The difference, he claimed, was human intention. This points to something radical. Intention may alter energy fields that interact with matter. Then there's Dr. Masaru Emoto, whose controversial water experiments became widely known in the early 2000s. He exposed water samples to different words, thoughts, and pieces of music, then froze the water and photographed the resulting crystals. Water exposed to love, gratitude, and compassion formed symmetrical, aesthetically stunning patterns. Water exposed to hatred or anger produced distorted, chaotic forms. Critics have pointed out the lack of rigorous scientific controls in Emoto studies, and that's a valid concern. But even as anecdotal evidence, the pattern is striking and mirrors ancient ideas found in numerous cultures. That words have power, that thoughts carry weight, that intention changes structure. If thought is energy and emotion is the amplifier, then intention is the combination, energy shaped by will. Now consider how often you unintentionally broadcast. Every judgment, every inner complaint, every unresolved grudge. These are not silent. They're energetic emissions. They affect your nervous system, your perception, and potentially the informational structure around you. This is why focus matters. In chaotic states, the mind produces low-coherence signals like static. These may scatter energy and reinforce disorder. But when you bring thought into alignment using meditation, breathwork, visualization, or deep emotion, you shift into coherence. You produce signals that are synchronized, powerful, and potentially resonant with your environment. Coherence is not just a mental state. It's a measurable pattern, and patterns have power. In fact, this may explain why some practices, long dismissed as pseudoscience, are now being revisited with fresh scientific interest. Take focused visualization. When you picture a specific outcome, clearly, repeatedly, and emotionally, you train your nervous system. But something else may be happening too. You may be sending that energetic blueprint into a field that responds in kind. This echoes an idea from Eastern philosophy, that mind and matter are not separate, that consciousness is not the byproduct of matter, it is its organizing principle. If thought is indeed energy, and energy is the basis of all matter, then thought has reach. And intention becomes the method by which you direct that reach. This doesn't mean every fleeting wish materializes into reality. Most thoughts are disorganized, brief, or emotionally neutral. They cancel each other out. They form noise. But sustained, focused, emotionally charged thoughts, these behave differently. They may act like gravitational attractors, pulling subtle elements of your reality toward alignment with your inner state. Even in classical science, energy fields influence systems without physical contact. Magnetic fields move iron filings. Electric fields induce motion in particles. Gravity shapes the orbits of stars. Why should thought be exempt? And if intention forms patterns in your personal field, those patterns may either harmonize or clash with external systems. This is where resonance becomes critical. You don't change reality through force. You influence it through frequency. You tune your mind to the signal of the outcome you desire and allow that resonance to bring coherence between you and your desired state. And when you consistently operate in that frequency through thoughts, feelings, and actions, you don't just react to life. You shape it. This is the overlooked role of consciousness in science. We study forces. We measure masses. We quantify fields. but we rarely ask how thought fits into the equation. Yet the more we learn, the clearer it becomes. The mind is not outside the system. It's inside. It's active. It's energetic. If thought is energy, then every day you are generating power. Every time you focus your mind, you are transmitting. Every emotion you feel infuses that transmission with either coherence or chaos. So what happens when you consistently align your thoughts with clarity, with gratitude, with conviction? The answer is emerging in data, in experiments, in personal experiences replicated across the globe. Something shifts. Patterns change. Synchronicities increase. Barriers dissolve. Possibilities appear that were once hidden. This isn't magic. This is alignment. This is intentional energy. And if that's true, then your ability to shape your life doesn't begin with action. It begins with awareness, with focus, with choosing which thoughts to energize and which ones to release. Now that we've explored thought as an energetic force, we turn to something that directly shapes your physical world, the structure of your brain itself. Because when you think differently, your brain rewires. And when your brain rewires, your experience of reality changes, permanently. Change doesn't begin in your circumstances. It begins in your mind, not as a metaphor, not as a motivational phrase, as a neurological fact. The brain is not fixed. It is not hardwired from birth. It is not doomed to repeat patterns forever. What modern neuroscience confirms is this: your brain changes based on how you use it. And every time you think, feel, focus, or imagine, you're reshaping its structure. This phenomenon is called neuroplasticity. For years, scientists believed that once the brain matured, it became static, unchangeable. We now know this isn't true. The brain is constantly adapting. Neurons form new connections. Old pathways weaken. Entire networks reconfigure based on what you repeatedly think about. Neuroplasticity means that your dominant thoughts leave a physical trace. That mental repetition rewires your internal architecture. And over time, those changes shape not only how you think, but what you perceive as possible, what you expect from life, and what you attract into your experience. Here's how it works. Every thought triggers a pattern of neural activity. That pattern strengthens with repetition. Like a muscle that grows with exercise, the more a circuit is used, the stronger it becomes. And as it strengthens, it becomes automatic. Your brain begins to default to that pattern, even without conscious effort. This is how habits form. But it's also how beliefs are built, whether you choose them or not. Think a thought often enough and it hardens into a belief. That belief filters how you interpret the world. It shapes your decisions, your emotional responses, and your behavior. Eventually, it becomes invisible, a mental lens you mistake for reality. If you consistently think, "I'm not good enough," that idea doesn't just float in your mind. It forms a neural signature, and unless interrupted, it will shape your reality to reflect that belief. You'll notice more rejection. You'll overlook opportunities. You'll unconsciously behave in ways that fulfill the prophecy. But here's the key. Plasticity goes both ways. Just as your brain can be shaped by limitation, it can be reshaped by intention. When you consciously choose new thoughts, especially when those thoughts are vivid, emotionally charged, and repeated, you begin to rewire your brain for a different version of reality. This is not wishful thinking. This is neurobiology. Visualization, for example, is not just a mental exercise. When you vividly imagine yourself performing a task, your brain activates as if you were doing it physically. Studies have shown that athletes who mentally rehearse their movements improve almost as much as those who practice physically. The brain doesn't always distinguish between what's vividly imagined and what's real. This same mechanism applies to beliefs, behaviors, and emotional states. When you visualize success, healing, or peace, not just once but regularly, you strengthen the circuits associated with those experiences. You begin to train your mind to expect them, and expectation shapes perception. This is how neuroplasticity becomes reality creation. Let's break it down further. Your thoughts change your brain. Your brain filters your perception. Your perception shapes your behavior. Your behavior creates your outcomes. Now reverse engineer the process. If you want to change your outcomes, start by shifting your behavior. But sustainable behavioral change comes from perception, how you see yourself and the world. And perception is shaped by the structure of your brain, built by the thoughts you think every day. This is why affirmations, visualization, meditation, and intention setting work. Not because the universe simply grants wishes, but because these practices change the very instrument you use to interpret reality. This is the science behind ancient wisdom. Eastern philosophies have long taught that the mind is the root of experience, that suffering and liberation come not from the external world, but from how we process it internally. Neuroscience now confirms that what you focus on rewires your brain, and by rewiring your brain, you alter your experience of life. But the effects go even deeper. When your neural pathways shift, your emotional baseline shifts too. You become less reactive, more resilient, more aligned with clarity. And when your inner state changes, so does your outer world. This isn't about ignoring problems. It's about transforming the lens through which you see them. For example, someone stuck in a scarcity mindset will interpret events through fear. A delayed payment feels like a crisis. A lost opportunity feels like rejection. The world appears threatening, not because it is, but because the brain has been trained to see it that way. But when you retrain your mind to perceive abundance, even before the evidence appears, you begin to notice opportunities that were always there. You respond differently, you think creatively, and your outer reality starts to shift. Not by accident, but because your brain is now wired to seek, recognize, and respond to abundance. This isn't mystical thinking. It's cause and effect. And it's why some of the most effective reality-shifting techniques focus not on action alone, but on attention. By learning to guide your focus, you begin to consciously sculpt your brain. And when your brain changes, your life follows. Let's look at a few methods backed by research. Mindfulness meditation reduces activity in the brain's default mode network, associated with rumination and ego-driven thinking. Over time, it increases gray matter in areas related to self-awareness, compassion, and emotional regulation. Gratitude journaling strengthens neural circuits associated with reward and well-being. Practicing gratitude daily has been shown to increase dopamine and serotonin, chemicals linked to happiness and motivation. Mental rehearsal activates motor and prefrontal areas, creating new neural associations that prime your body and mind for success before it happens physically. These practices aren't just for stress relief. They are tools for neuroplastic engineering, ways to consciously direct the rewiring of your own brain. And that's the key, conscious direction. Left on autopilot, your brain will reinforce whatever is most familiar. Fear, doubt, anxiety, limitation. But when you take control of your mental inputs, what you think about, what you visualize, what you emotionally invest in, you begin to install a new operating system. And the new system runs a new program, one aligned with your chosen reality. This brings us back to the core principle. Reality creation is not about escaping the world. It's about reconditioning the mind, training the brain to expect, allow, and create experiences aligned with your conscious intention. When you understand this, change becomes inevitable, because you no longer wait for life to shift. You shift first, internally, neurologically, energetically, and once that happens, your external world begins to match your internal blueprint. Now that you've seen how the structure of your mind shapes your life, we're going to look at something that feels less like science and more like magic. Strange patterns, recurring symbols, coincidences that line up too perfectly to ignore. Is it all random? Or is the universe reflecting something back to you? Next, we explore the mystery of synchronicity and why it may be far more than coincidence. You see a number repeated on the clock. You think about someone and they call you. You mention an obscure idea, and someone else brings it up minutes later. These moments feel too perfect, too timed, too unlikely to dismiss. Yet they're easy to rationalize as chance. But what if they aren't? What if these experiences, known as synchronicities, are not accidents? What if they are reflections? Synchronicity is the term coined by psychologist Carl Jung to describe meaningful coincidences, events that appear connected not by cause, but by significance. Unlike mere luck or randomness, synchronicity feels personal. It feels like the universe is responding. But here's the twist. Maybe it is. Let's strip this idea of mysticism and look at it through a cognitive lens. The human brain is wired to detect patterns. It does this automatically, constantly scanning for relationships, correlations, cause and effect. It helps us survive. But it also gives us the ability to notice patterns that go beyond mere survival. Patterns that carry personal meaning. This is where synchronicity becomes more than just an oddity. It becomes a message, one that emerges not from outside you, but through the interplay between your consciousness and the field of reality itself. Here's how that could work. Your brain isn't passively observing the world. It's actively constructing it. From the moment you wake up, it filters reality based on what it already believes, expects, and values. This process is called predictive coding. Your mind is constantly guessing what's coming next, and what you perceive is shaped by those guesses. Now, apply this to the idea of synchronicity. When your internal state is highly focused, whether emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, your attention sharpens. You become more aware of relevant information. You notice patterns that align with your thoughts and feelings. And when those inner states are strong enough, they seem to project outward, calling into awareness matching symbols, signs, and events. The universe doesn't change to match your thoughts. Your perception changes to see what aligns with your thoughts. But here's the fascinating part. Sometimes external circumstances do seem to respond. Let's go deeper. There's growing interest in the idea that reality operates like a hologram, a system in which every part contains the whole and every point is connected. In such a system, your mind wouldn't be isolated. It would be embedded in a network that reflects back to you the frequencies you emit. Synchronicity in this context is a feedback loop. You think, feel, imagine, and reality mirrors it back. Not always immediately, not always literally, but consistently enough to suggest that your inner state shapes the structure of your experience. This isn't about controlling the universe. It's about aligning with it. When your mind is clear, focused, and coherent, the feedback becomes clearer. You start noticing signs that affirm your path. Not because they were placed there by some outside force, but because your internal signal is strong enough to shape your awareness and interaction with reality. Think of it like tuning a radio. When your mental frequency is fuzzy, the signal is filled with noise. The world feels random. Events don't make sense. But when you align your thoughts, emotions, and intentions, you tune in to a cleaner frequency. And in that space, synchronicities appear not as interruptions but as confirmations. This is also supported by emerging cognitive science. Studies show that priming the brain with certain stimuli causes people to notice related information more frequently, a phenomenon known as the Bader-Meinhof effect or frequency illusion. Once something becomes mentally significant, your brain flags it in the environment. But synchronicity goes beyond just noticing. It's not just seeing more of what's already there, it's about meaning. The events that occur are often deeply personal, emotionally resonant, and precisely timed. This is where the simulation theory comes into view. Some scientists and thinkers have proposed that we live in a simulated universe, one governed by informational code, not physical matter. If that's true, then your thoughts may be more than internal experiences. They may be inputs, and the simulation responds not only to your actions, but to your consciousness. In a simulated or holographic model of reality, synchronicity would function like real-time feedback. Your focused awareness acts like a command line, and the reality you experience adjusts to display the output. Whether or not the universe is a literal simulation, the parallels are striking. Now, skeptics will say, people see patterns where there are none. They confuse coincidence with meaning. And yes, sometimes that's true. But the sheer number, timing, and emotional impact of synchronicities for many people can't be explained away by statistics alone. These events often happen during periods of intense transition, inner clarity, or deep spiritual work. They don't feel like luck. They feel like responses. That's the key idea here. Synchronicities aren't random. They are reflections. They reflect your inner state back to you through the language of external events. They show you where your attention is. They offer clues, confirmation, and sometimes course correction. Here's the deeper truth. The universe doesn't speak in words. It speaks in symbols, timing, resonance, and alignment. And when you're open, present, and mentally clear, you understand that language. You see the coincidences not as isolated accidents, but as parts of a greater dialogue between your mind and the structure of reality. This turns life into something extraordinary, because now, every moment can carry meaning. Every sign can become guidance. Every thought becomes more than private. It becomes part of the fabric of your experience. And this is not just about theory. You can test it. Start by paying attention. Not obsessively, but curiously. When you experience a strong thought or emotion, notice what follows. When you feel clear on a decision or path, see what signs appear. When you're mentally aligned with peace, gratitude, or focus, observe the rhythm of events around you. The more coherent your internal state, the more synchronized your external experiences become. And over time, you begin to understand. Synchronicity is not a mystery. It's a mirror, a system of feedback built into the structure of consciousness itself. This is why ancient teachings have always emphasized awareness. Because with awareness, you not only navigate life, you begin to read it. You understand that thoughts shape more than your emotions. They shape your path. They create ripple effects that come back as patterns, symbols, and moments of stunning clarity. So the next time you see a repeating number, hear the same phrase multiple times, or have a chance encounter that feels meaningful, pause. That may not be randomness. It may be reality reflecting your own signal. Now that we've explored how your thoughts influence attention, the quantum field, energy patterns, the structure of your brain, and even the feedback you receive from life itself, one final question remains. If the universe is listening to every thought, every emotion, every intention you send, what will you choose to think next?